foundation for true science and a foundation for false science. We'll be looking at these. This is called Science, True or False. Why is it that science is no longer a study of creation's design? Science, the study of this world's activities of weather, living things, and the inanimate, is supposed to bring from its studies the truth about how they operate. Weather patterns, the behavior of living things, and the reactive capacities of the mineral world only operate as God designed they would. Observing them in operation should be just a matter of recording what is observed. True science should be observations under varying conditions. Today's science is full of lies. It is viewed as a study of weather, living things, and the mineral world to learn how to make a profit from the information gathered. Scientists study creation's design not to understand how it operates, but to understand how weather, living things, and the earth's elements can be manipulated to make money. Profits are devised from the sale of products or information. To sell something requires that a buyer has an interest in acquiring it. It may be needed for food, clothing, or shelter, or it may be lusted after for fashion or some other form of self-worship. Corrupted people lust for superiority over others in dress, possessions, positions, whatever creates a feeling of superiority. This is an ill-devised way to suppress their feeling of inferiority. People who don't know God created to be his beloved children, princes and princes of the King of the universe, have a void in life that can never be filled except by knowing him. We all need food, clothing, and shelter in a sinful world. To divert us from seeking God for our needs, Satan has devised the advertising of needs that never satisfy. The need to look beautiful, the need to have the best, need after need that does not bring peace of mind is presented to empty people as the solution for their empty feelings. God supplies our true needs. Knowing who to thank for our true needs is important. Many false gods over the course of mankind's history have been presented as worthy of honoring with praise for this. But only the Creator and Designer of Earth really deserves our thanks. In the study of creation's design, to believe the simple things evolved into complex things is a false science taught in public schools. With this foolish teaching, students must be taught not to question what they're being taught. God-given observation skills that the eyes, ear, nose, tongue, and skin can sense are relegated to the trash heap of nonsense. A social education of what one needs in life is designed to enslave mankind. The new social norm, quote, that you will have nothing and be happy, end quote, requires a brainwashing in God's implanted design of liberty to make decisions for yourself. Where to go, how to live, who to be thankful to for life's providences. These freedoms come from God. Satan wants to replace them with a slave's lifestyle. True science brings from its studies the reality of creation's design that gave mankind a paradise. True science explains how God's creation design is functioning, that everything is aiding, assisting, helping, or serving everything else around it. This provides food, habitat, and assists in reproduction for living creatures. True science shows how God's creation design demonstrates the love of the Creator towards his creation. The pleasure and delight of this delicately made paradise should be made prominent. And studies to repair the damage we did to paradise should be persuaded. True science declares God's goodness in all that he made, and man's folly in damaging it. True science does not try to recreate Earth into cities, suburbs, or industrial agriculture. It leads people to the liberty of settling on a piece of land to live on it and work it to restore paradise lost. It leads one to honor God by reestablishing creation's paradise design. True science praises God by accepting the lifestyle he assigned mankind in the beginning. It guides and directs all mankind back to the occupation God gave us as stewards of earth. It shows us how to keep the ground's microbial livestock operating to feed all the plants that feed us. It leads us to an understanding of planting designs that recreate the Edenic garden God wanted for every new family. You can read more about that in Education by Ellen White, page 22. Science, falsely so-called, seeks to enslave men to need their products. It lies about the paradise God gave us to keep up. It hides how creation operates to serve each other. It says all things have evolved by fighting to survive. False science seeks to deceive the inhabitants of Earth with false reports of nature's capabilities. It says our food supply needs their industrial agriculture to feed the world. It says factory-fabricated fertilizers and pesticides are needed for crops to survive. It lies about how organic agriculture methods that are now feeding 70% of the Earth. It declares there would be famine if we depended on small organic growers to feed us, even though they produce 4 to 4.5 tons of food per acre, while industrial agriculture produces approximately 2 tons per acre. Science, falsely so-called, declares they can come up with a better design of plants, animals, and humans than God has designed. It claims to have benevolent intentions for genetically modifying food plants, like increasing vitamin A in rice to prevent childhood blindness, while instead it fills the earth with genetically modified corn and soybeans that can be soaked in Roundup poison and not die. It claims Roundup is harmless until it gets caught spreading cancer with it all over the earth. False science grows poisons in the corn plant to kill worms that eat it, even though we have to eat it. It claims poisons are needed to kill off God's garbage disposal crews of insects, fungus, bacteria, and virus that will only eat unhealthy plants. God wants us to only eat healthy plants. False science is out for profit. Sales of its product are the reason for its existence. False science cares nothing about mankind's well-being. It is even now seeking to reduce Earth's population like it seeks to reduce insect pest populations. False science, instead of observing healthy crops and then establishing the environment that brought about its good health, hides this knowledge because it interferes with their rescue chemistry sales. False science has studied to increase bushels and bins of food per acre with little regard for its steadily decreasing nutrient content. It celebrates when a new product is developed that creates an even ever-growing need for it, like potassium chloride as a potassium fertilizer. The potassium in potassium chloride supplies plants with a needed nutrient, but the chloride kills off microbes in the soil that decompose last year's plant material, giving the farmer free potassium. Less free potassium, and you need more and more of the factory-fabricated potassium chloride. False science provides farmers an erroneous information at agricultural colleges, like the nitrogen cycle that says plants need nitrogen in water-soluble forms. Yet, pristine landscapes of prairies and forests provide less than 5% of the nitrogen the plants use in water-soluble form. 95% of it or more is a non-water-soluble form. It is stored in the bodies of microbes and released by the microbes to the plant as the plant makes sugar from sunlight and feeds it to them. Nature's operations, where everything is helping and aiding each other, is true science. True science shows benevolent symbiosis. It shows where we may help or aid soil microbes and plants to grow as God designed. It shows how to increase the nitrogen-fixing capacity of the soil microbes that feed plants. It encourages the use of cover crops that aerate the ground, daikon radishes that penetrate the soil with deep tap roots and then die off in winter, leave deep crevices in the ground for air to cover many times more soil surface. This vastly increases habitat for nitrogen-fixing microbes. Rye plants that have been recorded producing over 100 miles of roots loosen the soil habitat and feed microbe colonies to increase nitrogen for the next crop. Planting cover crops aids soil microbes and plants. False science disrupts creation's design of plants feeding microbes, animals, and us. It portrays nature's components as having the wisdom to make decisions and to evolve themselves into complex organisms. True science observes nature's activities as a holistic operation. It shows everything working together to aid and assist each other. It shows a lovingly orchestrated creation that a kind and benevolent creator made. Parts of creation have no intelligence to evolve upward into organized organisms. When we view agriculture as parts, we play God as we decide what the parts need, what the plants need to grow. Some plant growers love their role of playing God. With it, they can increase bushels and bins and increase their profits. Chemical agriculture and organic agriculture both force plants with nitrogen to increase bushels and bins to increase profits. God created plants not for profit, but for food. God imparted scientific knowledge to mankind about the role of groundskeeping and the role of landscape design. God gave mankind a mind to observe damage to his ecosystem design. Groundskeeping and planting are affected by our ignoring natural ecosystem designs. Grazers leave manure behind when they graze. God designed dung beetles to bury it, just as he taught cats and dogs and people to bury it, Deuteronomy 23:13. When we kill off dung beetles by force-feeding them a grain diet or use dewormers, their feces sickens dung beetles and they die off. Manure remains on the surface to cause rank forced growth to grass near it. Grazers avoid eating it unless their confinement forces them to eat it. Rank growth increases the number of bales of hay per acre. It increases the profits of those who sell it. But farmers raising their livestock on rank growth, if observant, will detect increased vet bills from this kind of feed and wisely go to nature's way of feeding grazers and letting them graze and eat the best and trample the rest. True science is observation of natural settings and how they operate. False science studies man-made settings, then tries to redesign natural settings. True science does not redesign nature's design of all things working together. It assists it. True science prays to the creator of nature's design for the understanding to serve the ground's livestock and to place plants in natural designs that will enhance the nutrient uptake of the garden ecosystem being managed. Playing God by creating settings that are not God's natural design lead to failure. God in his mercy will show us our folly of trying to create a new design for his created plants. Greenhouse tomatoes have been the rage for decades now. Greenhouse operations have filled the colder climates of Europe, North America, and Asia with greenhouses as far as the eye can see in some areas. Growing these plants in troughs where fertilized water feeds them is common practice. No longer is God's design used where microbes and insects governed by weather and assist the plant to grow in the ground. Recently, diseases have swept Europe's greenhouse tomato operations and have come to America. The Seventh-day Adventist tomato greenhouse operation in Hadley, Massachusetts has had to close. God's microbial fertilizing operation of soil life, guided by weather, growing crops, had been substituted with man's attempt at deciding what nutrients a tomato needed. This failed. God's design of creation's operation will never be fully understood. What can be fully understood is that God designed it and knows fully how to operate it, and that we can be guided by him in the occupation he gave us as groundskeepers and landscape architects. Growing plants in the ground that God created to be grown in the ground. We should grow plants in the ground that God created to grow in the ground, and place plants in garden designs that God has pre-planned to be companions to increase nutrient uptake for the entire garden ecosystem. God's way is always the best way. Eat in season what God prepared for that season. Spring is a time fresh greens sprout. Eat those tender plants. Summer is when fruits begin to appear. Eat berries and garden fruits of cucumbers, summer squash, tomatoes, etc. Fall is the time tree fruits and fresh greens again as perennials and biennials produce as God designed. Store tree fruits and nuts and grow cold weather hardy biennials for winter use. Dig roots and store them in the ground as mice do. Gather nuts and store them in the ground as squirrels do. Increase your rest as many animals do to prepare for next year's activities. The idea that we must create cities and suburbs as monuments to man's glorious achievements instead of a cottage home on the land is not God's way for mankind. Science that overlooks nature's template on how to live through the four seasons is false science. True science looks at how God has provided for our care year-round. It recognizes the 8 laws of health, our environmental laws that require a God-designed lifestyle for our well-being. A home on the land where the seasonal changes can be felt and worked with renews health and hope. Nature is pleasant and cheering when lived in, as animals show how. Sweltering deserts are home for ground dwellers. Underground tunnels where hot winds cooled by the lower temperatures of the soil make pleasant dwelling for those who attempt to live there. Tropics are beautiful and hot, but water cools when evaporates in hot, dry tropics. In hot, wet tropics, airflow cools. It moderates the climate. Animals rest in these airflows. In temperate zones, all 4 seasons can be pleasantly enjoyed when nature's wisdom guides us. In 6 Testimonies, page 178, it says, Nature's voice is the voice of Christ, teaching us innumerable lessons of love, power, submission, and perseverance. End quote. True science hearkens to Christ's voice. It designs homes according to nature's template. It uses the ground for homes where Christ's voice in nature says to. It designs water flow to cool homes like swamp coolers in the hot, dry inland valleys of California. It uses adobe for building material where wood is scarce. It uses large banana leaves and other big leaves for roofs to keep dry in wet, hot climates. It uses long reeds for thick insulated roofs in cooler climates. It adapts to the climate using renewable materials nature has provided for housing. False science forces upon people building codes for cosmetic design, product sales, house placement, and a host of other expenses and other useless requirements. False science requires building for longevity so the banker can get money over and over on the dwelling. False science ignores the benefits of a south-facing home and requires that it face the street. False science uses materials that are toxic, that are off-gassing fumes for years. False science requires copper piping. False science requires water catchment areas so contaminated water go direct into the water table instead of going to natural low areas with accumulated organic matter to act as a carbon filter before it goes into the water table. Food, clothing, and shelter are not a problem that God left mankind to figure out by trial and error. True science, observation of nature's design, and utilizing its wise teachings provides all our needs. The wool of sheep and the cashmere hair of goats, their winter coats, we have learned to gather and use for our winter clothing. The lanolin on the wool keeps it supple and is a needed ointment that prevents chapped hands when wool mittens are worn. Fibrous plants can be used for ropes or thread by twining them. If they're smooth and tough fibers, they can be used for cloth, for clothing. Flax stems for linen, cotton boll fibers for cotton, cloth, and sisal for strings bless us. Fiber is gathered at the end of the season before it rots, just as wool was first gathered when it naturally fell off. Velcro, as a clasp design, was learned by observing stick-tight seeds to see why they so readily stick to our clothing and animals' hair. Food of every kind are eaten by animals and birds. Observing what they will or will not eat is an easy way to try out new foods. Observing what apple trees the deers prefer to eat can tell us what varieties are accumulating necessary nutrients needed by us who are eating plants from the same soil as them. Different plants accumulate different elements. Astragalus herb has been prescribed several times lately. Astragalus in the Dakotas is called locoweed. When horses eat it while grazing, after about 1 month, they become sick from it. This is confined grazing, where they do not have free rein to go where they want to eat and eat what they choose. Astragalus accumulates selenium, a necessary nutrient, in many areas, but one that is in excess in the Dakotas. A friend who successfully raised healthy goats in Alaska moved to New York and raised goats only to have some die of selenium deficiency. Once selenium supplements were given, health returned. If those goats had not been confined, they would have found selenium accumulating plants and eaten them. Nature's pharmacy is used by animals and birds. They are led by God to the plants that have the missing elements they need. It's important to note that in the ocean, fish and animals that live there have no sicknesses unless they're near mankind's polluted seas. Seas are small arms of the ocean. Living creatures have all the minerals they need because washing from the land are the mineral salts that we need for health. When soil is not kept the way God designed, the dead and dying microbes release their minerals that they had mined or manufactured for the use of plants. In water-soluble form, they have flowed downstream to the seas and then the ocean. What should be available for healthy plants to feed animals and man, healthy food, will not be available unless the ground's care that God gave us to do is carried out the way He designed. The landscape design work that God gave us in Genesis 2:15 of placing plants to serve each other creates an Edenic garden for our families to live in. Forests, prairies, chaparral, deserts, etc. are examples of designed sharing of nutrients by companion plants. For instance, if a selenium accumulator companion plant is removed from a natural or garden design, nearby plants can have selenium deficiency. Animals can travel to find an area that has selenium accumulator plants to eat. Plants can only go as far as their roots. So ecosystem designs are very important for plant health. Hence, they are very important for our health. Some nutrients are airborne. In some areas, God diffuses nutrients into the air for the species growing in that ecosystem to share. Plant leaves gather them just like when we foliar feed a crop. The Smoky Mountains of Georgia and the Blue Mountain Ridges of Virginia are visual observations of this happening. The human body needs almost all, if not all, the elements found in seawater. Human cells do not need them all. Microbe cells from microbes living in the many microbiomes in our body and on our body need all these mineral elements to produce the great number of nutrients that they supply us. Without their nutrition, our body's living assistants supply us. We cannot be healthy. Therefore, we must make sure they get what they need to stay healthy. Without the elements soil fungus, bacteria, and virus provide plants, they can't be healthy. Larger soil creatures that burrow in the soil and aerate it have exudates that feed these microbes that feed plants. Without all of the actors that God made to play their part in the operation of growing plants, plants cannot perform their role of importing healthful food for us. When men play God and design their fertilizer programs for the plants to eat, excesses to the point of toxicity occur, as well as deficiencies. One of the biggest problems in commercial agriculture today here in America is that agricultural lands have excessive minerals that tie up or imbalance what plants need. When God designed plants, 90% of the species on Earth have mycorrhizal fungi assisting them in the uptake of nutrients. These fungal roots extend plant roots outreach. These fungal roots, called mycelium, create in natural settings an internet of communication. This internet is used by plants to make their fungal partners aware of their changing needs. During reproduction, the plants can require up to 50 times more of certain nutrients. When they inform the fungus of their need, the fungus transports it to them. True science teaches the role of plant assistance and cares for the ground so minerals are not destroyed, so microbes are not destroyed. Excessive tilling destroys them, yet tilling is necessary at certain stages of plant growth. Vegetative growth, when a seed sprouts and begins to create a plant, needs enough tillage to begin the early growth. Only a slight disturbance of the soil surface is needed to begin the process. After the vegetative stage is complete, like the corn stalk is grown, then the fruiting stage begins, which requires a well-established fungal mycelial layer to develop healthy fruit. Many soils on Earth are seriously compacted. Plant roots have difficulty penetrating the hardpan. Here, a one-time subsoiling or deep tilling can solve that problem if the groundskeepers know how to keep it from compacting again. We are God's groundkeepers, Genesis 2:5. The paradise God gave us had no compacted soil. The flood damaged the earth, but God's creation of animals that burrow, trees that penetrate hardpan, had repaired much of the earth. Our working of the soil with heavy equipment has created most of the hardpan we see today. Of all God's creatures that can repair compaction, the tiniest of all is the strongest. Mycorrhizal fungi can break rock apart. Element by element, they break it apart to supply plants these needed elements. They supply bacterial colonies the raw materials for them to make plant fertilizers. Then they transplant that plant food to the plant roots. True science studies these activities and seeks to assist God's design in its repair of Earth's soil. False science makes money from fertilizer sales and rescue chemistry, which stops God's garbage disposal crews that eat only unhealthy plants. False science is the sickness relief industry. False science is the cut out and remove disease parts industry. True science is the 8 laws of health that create an environment that is healthful. It creates an environment in the soil so healthy food can be grown. It plants an Edenic garden designed to live in. True science studies to assist microbes and plants that clean up polluted water and air. Many of the most commonly grown houseplants are excellent air purifiers. True science studies the use of herbs and foods that heal. It studies the value of rest and exercise. True science brings people to the knowledge of our loving Creator who gave us a paradise to maintain. It tells of His patience towards our foolish behavior that damages our bodies, the earth, and our relationship with Him. It tells us of His willingness to redeem us of our sicknesses, how to repair paradise, and how to repair our relationship with our Maker. True science prepares us for eternal life.